Hello and welcome to revision tips for CIPS Level 4, Diploma in Procurement and Supply. And this is Module 5, Commercial Negotiations, Learning Outcome 1, which is to understand the key approaches in negotiation of commercial agreements with external suppliers. So we'll look at the application of commercial negotiations, differentiate between the different types of approaches that can be pursued, explain the power and balance of commercial negotiations, and the different types of relationships. So negotiation can be defined in many ways, but most of which describe the use of a process or a methodology. Now, CIPS defines the procurement as a process of communication to reach an agreement. A negotiation can also be described as a process whereby two parties come together to confer in a situation where there is some conflict of interest between them, and they've got a view to concluding a jointly acceptable agreement. And that can be applied in a range of situations, including commercial and industrial negotiations and general conflict resolution and problem solving. Now, commercial negotiations take place within procurement and supply throughout the sourcing process and take place at a number of key stages. Buyer-supplier relationships may require negotiation at two levels, strategic and tactical. Strategic negotiations are carried out less frequently, but at a higher level, and it addresses long-ranging issues, whereas tactical negotiations are carried out more frequently at a lower level to address its short-range issues. But even as you look at this sourcing process on the screen, we might have to negotiate with our internal stakeholders about their needs and defining the specs. We obviously negotiate with suppliers when we're appraising them and looking at their quotes. And even later on, in the contract award and performance review, there may be parts where perhaps it's been open to interpretation and we see things in different ways, and we may have to negotiate later on in the contract as well. Now, a key role of procurement is to develop and maintain those commercial relationships. This can involve conflict management. Negotiation is the first type of conflict resolution that should be considered to resolve any issues. The sources of conflict in procurement and supply can be caused by limited resources, differing perspectives, or a power struggle, changes to a relationship or the environment to which you exist, or just purely through a misunderstanding. In many relationships, there is a degree of interdependence between parties whereupon they rely on each other. And this will include relationships with the functions and with the purchasing team. And it may cause conflict when the party that the individual or function is relying on doesn't perform. So on here, you can see the different types. You've got shared resources, differences in goals, objectives, values and perceptions, or a power imbalance, changes to the circumstances, personality clashes, and ambiguity and misunderstandings. Now, there are two types of conflict within a negotiation. So firstly, what is being negotiated and how it's being negotiated. Sources of conflict regarding the process can arise due to lack of clarity before the negotiation, or different negotiation styles where one party may adopt quite a hard negotiating tactic that results in a win-lose outcome, and the other favours building relationships to gain a win-win outcome. Cultural differences such as dress codes and terms of address could also be a source of conflict. The methods of communication, whether that's face-to-face or phone calls or videos, but also the team size and the makeup. To minimise conflict, you should agree some ground rules with the other party in advance of any negotiating meeting and manage divergent positions in order to achieve a win-win outcome. So here you can see the sources of divergent positions on the screen. It could be price, one might be looking to pay as little as possible, whereas the other wants to charge as much as possible. Quality, one might want highest, one want to deliver the lowest. And as you go through it, you can see those divergent positions and conflict on things like payment terms, risk, volumes, terms and conditions, and dispute resolution. Now you may need to pause this so you can have a look at what those words are at the side of the first diagram. But this is the Thomas Kilmann conflict model instrument. It outlines the positions available when entering into a negotiation. And it looks at two dimensions. Assertiveness, which is concerned with the conflict response based on the attempt to get what we want. And cooperativeness, which is concerned with the conflict response that's helping others to get what they want. This produces 5 approaches to conflict resolution, each of which has its own objective. So you've got competing, top left-hand corner. This is objective where they want to win. Accommodating, the objective is to yield and give in to the other party. Avoiding, the objective is to delay it. Compromising in the middle is to find some middle ground. And collaborating at the top right-hand corner is to find a win-win solution. There are 2 parties in a conflict, so this results in 25 potential combinations of styles that can be brought to any conflict situation. And some of these combinations are more concurrent than others. The collaborating approach is generally seen as the most effective one to adopt as an initial position in the most circumstances, assuming that the ongoing relationship is important. Now, negotiation teams usually consist of a team leader who directs the negotiation, a note taker who can be used to summarize and confirm points agreed and discussed, an observer who is there to simply identify any non-verbal cues, an expert in the subject being discussed, where the outside of the negotiation team's expertise. Now, bringing a team to the negotiation table requires an understanding of the physiological needs of a negotiation. The use of the team can provide several benefits. Firstly, the negotiation team can benefit the situation by bringing innovation and integrative solutions based on their different positions and views and experience. Team negotiators sense a greater degree of power as they have their colleagues to back them up. And this is especially true in difficult situations where a single negotiator would be inclined to back down or make concessions when it wasn't necessary to do so. And team negotiators stimulate more discussions and more information being shared than individuals do on their own. Now, during the stages of integrative negotiation, the focus will be on understanding the problem and reaching an acceptable solution. Tasks will include encouraging the sharing of information, using discussions and questions to understand the parties' requirements, focusing on common ground and generating ideas and options. So, for example, the problem might be defined by a lack of performance, such as a late delivery. During the negotiations, it's discovered that this is because of the lack of storage space at the supplier's premises. Several solutions are generated, including better use of space at the supplier's premises and stock being held by the buying organisation. These options are evaluated and both parties recognise that a buffer stock at the buyer's premises would be the best solution, as it secures supply and the buyer has the space. It doesn't incur any significant costs. Then the parties can agree on the outcome. During the stage of distributive negotiation, the buyer will need to consider their offer, their opening stance, and the pattern of concessions, if any, they're willing to make. Now, their task will include assessing and creating resistant points, dampening the impression of the other party, along with their perception and making use of deadlines. Now, principled styled negotiation focuses on the collaborative approach of conflict management and dispute resolution. It proposes using an integrative approach to finding a mutually agreed shared outcome. The principled style has 4 principles. The first is to separate the people from the problem or the issue. The second is to focus on interests, not positions. And the third is to invent options for mutual gain. And the fourth is to insist on using objective criteria. So on that third principle, as I said, it's to invent options for mutual gain. And you can see on the screen some ways in which you can overcome obstacles. Now, pragmatic negotiations deal with issues sensibly and realistically based on their practicality rather than emotional or theoretical points. So as an example, a supplier may be upset because they don't agree with the price the negotiator is asking for. Now, rather than getting into an argument over why they should accept the price, the negotiator explains the practical reasons why they believe the price is correct. They're able to say, this is where we are now, and this is why. So the role of pragmatic negotiations is to persuade the other party to understand your point of view and the method to prove your position. Internal proof makes use of the facts already included in the negotiation. External proof requires the introduction of new facts into the negotiation from the other evidence or opinions. So in our example, the negotiator may be using historical data based on previous prices or facts gathered from the marketplace. Now, principled negotiations, on the other hand, is where the negotiator is warm with the people, attempting to understand their position and interests, along with concerns, and they're tough on issues, ensuring that both parties achieve benefit and to ensure they do not end up in a win-lose position. Principled negotiations see the parties working collaboratively to attack a shared problem or to maximise a shared opportunity. It also identified as a way of shifting negotiation from a distributive to a more integrative approach. Now, for negotiations to be successful, there must be a zone in which a party is able to come to a possible agreement. And outside of this zone, the parties could walk away. This walkaway position represents a resistant point in the zone of potential agreement. In many instances, the zone will relate to price, but it can be applied to other variables such as time, quality, or quantity. They will also set a range of targets that can be built upon to get a better deal. And within the zone of the negotiator will set their MIL, which is the must, intend, and like. The price they must achieve to make the possible deal viable. The price they intend to achieve, which will be lower than the top price they're prepared to pay. And the price they would be likely to achieve based on their understanding of the supplier in the market. And by setting this range of targets, the negotiator can aim to reach their first point and then press on to see if they can reach the next. Now, tradables are items you're willing to trade in a negotiation. They're also known as variables. So generate as many tradables as you can before entering into a negotiation. The more tradables can be identified, the more likely there is that the opportunity will end up with a win-win outcome, as it will prevent a deadlock situation. So some of the examples of tradables will include the price, payment terms, length of contract or agreement, minimum order quantities, lead times, the terms and conditions, publicity and reference site permissions, exclusivity of supply, intellectual property rights, as well as added value services. But for each objective and variable or tradable, you need to establish things like what you must achieve, what you intend to achieve, and what you'd like to achieve, remembering the MIL from the previous slide. And before entering a negotiation, you need to have agreed a position with the stakeholders or budget holder regarding what your targets are and what you can trade with. The buyer should prepare themselves for a situation in which they cannot reach an agreement. This will require a BATNA, which is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement, or in other words, a plan B. They must decide for what reasons they wish to continue to engage with the other party, or if there is a reason that they will not engage with them at all, and to identify the point at which they will disengage from the negotiation. So it could include cost of walking away, the consequences of walking away, and any other options available to the negotiator if they do walk away. The decision to disengage must be considered carefully, and it will lead the buyer to establishing their walkaway position or their BATNA. It should also be noted that power can be used as leverage within negotiation, but an imbalance of power can lead to coercion and manipulation, and an ethical negotiator wouldn't use power improperly. The good judgment of when and where to use power is essential to achieve a winning outcome, maximize value, move forward, eliminate defences, and achieve commitment. And it's about securing that win-win outcome, maximising the own party's share and value, moving forward, pushing through the barriers, and securing commitment. There are 3 levels to consider: the relative power of the buyer and the supplier. Firstly, it's level 1, which is the macro environment. So you can use pestle analysis to look at political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors. And that will help you to understand the bigger picture regarding trends, developments, opportunities, and threats in the microenvironment. So for each of the pestle factors, buyers should ask things like, what trends or changes could affect my power? And could any trends or changes significantly affect the other party's power? Level 2 looks at the microenvironment, the industry structure. So you can use Porter's 5 forces to analyse things like the intensity of industrial rivalry, the bargaining power of the buyers or suppliers, as well as the threat of substitutes and new entrants. Now, this analysis will help the organisation to understand their strength and position within the industry, and it will make the decision makers understand to defend or grow their market share or profits in an existing or a new market. And then level 3 is the supply positioning, one-to-one organisation power. So you can use the segmentation tool that you can see on the screen, the sort of that's the supplier segmentation. And that helps them to classify them based on their importance. So the supplier positioning model helps the buyer understand the supplier's perspective so that you can determine which suppliers are more important. And the supplier positioning model considers the supplier's perspective of the buyer based on their spend and attractiveness. A key objective of strategic procurement and category management is to maximise spend leverage by channeling as much spend as possible through the organisations to fewer suppliers as possible, so you can extract volume discounts and other benefits. And a key source of leverage in the market is an organisation's absolute and relative spend as a customer. Other methods to increase leverage in the market with suppliers include, I suppose, leverage being increased through consolidating spend with a smaller number of preferred suppliers, vendor-based reduction, volume consolidation, and forming purchasing consortia. And leverage can be increased through analytics. That involves carrying out spend analysis to find out who in the organisation is spending the money, who are they spending it with, and how much are they spending on the categories. And that will show the buyer that there's opportunities to increase leverage with suppliers. Leverage can be increased by projecting the organisation as an attractive customer, even if it's not currently a big spender. So it may include things like highlighting simple procurement and contracting processes, prompt payments, or engaging the supplier in innovation opportunities. Now, in 1959, French and Raven described 5 bases of power, and then 6 years later added an extra power based on the form of information. So expert power is the most valuable power base. If you have some particular skill or expertise that others value, then you have power over them. If they need or want you to, especially if they need or want what you possess. This is the power that professionals have over us, the managers, the consultants, the tutors. We do what they say because we believe they possess some skill or competence. Then we've got reward power, and that's power to give positive things to others. Money, praise, perks, and other things that others need or want. Money is powerful because it's valued by others. With wealth comes reward power. And then legitimate power is the power that comes with a position, some sort of authority. All leaders carry some level of legitimate power, but it's what you do with that authority that makes you effective. So be consistent, be humble about it, and you can use your legitimacy more powerfully. Referent power comes from being recognised, liked, and admired, and respected by others, especially those who have power. It's the power of strong relationships. This is the power of charismatic leaders who attract and aspire loyal, admirable followers. Coercive power is the power to punish and force others to take action, and it's a dangerous power based on the wield. To use coercive power effectively, it's best to be subtle. And then the final one is that knowledge is power. That's the information one. Now, power in a buyer and supplier relationships fall into three categories. It can be overt and obvious, making decisions open in front of those involved in the negotiation. And the decision can stop things happening or make things happen. It can be subtle or implied, such as close discussions made outside of the arena of the negotiation that's not linked to anyone's authority. Or it can be built into the situation, such as senior managers having the final say on negotiation decisions, or the finance department controlling the spend. Now, information on purchasers can be found through direct contact with the company itself, searching directories, marketing data, negotiations, or commercial organisations who provide databases, online exchanges and forums. And it's basically historical data already held by the supplier, the journals, the exhibitors. Now, similar sources can be used for information on suppliers. Establishing databases and requests for quotes and proposals and information, and marketing communications on the internet, including exchanges and forums and publishing things like trade journals. But the commercial negotiations can vary quickly to the extent of their intensity and maturity, trust and commitment. And this spectrum you can see on the screen suggests that relationships are distinct and adapt rather than continue, and may start and finish anywhere on that spectrum or change according to the outside environment. Negotiations become more complex and comprehensive as it moves towards the right-hand side of the spectrum. The level of trust, commitment and collaboration also increases as alliances and partnerships are formed. So at one end you've got the adversarial, arm's length, distant relationships, and at the other end more strategic, partnership and co-densities. Now, relationship drivers are key qualities and values which build constructive relationships. And they're going to include the quality of interaction between the parties and the level of trust that's achieved, the transparency for both parties that they're willing to create, the commitment they both have to working towards a continued relationship, fostering relationships through cooperation, collaboration and mutual benefits. And trust can be developed by demonstrating collaborative behaviours, keeping commitments, working together and developing trust, sharing information and empathy. Now, signs of trust in business relationship include things like mutually agreed and managed objectives and success measures for the contract, including KPIs. Acceptance on both sides of the potential need to renegotiate terms when business conditions change. Real-time sharing of information on needs and priorities, and acceptance that there may be conflict, but it will be managed through issue resolution, joint problem solving, and defined escalation routes. Pride and strong effort, high employee and customer satisfaction, on-time delivery, total cost reduction, high-performing teams that feel empowered and get the job done, and the supplier being encouraged to and welcoming the opportunity to innovate. Both parties bring ideas and share information, and resources are being freed internally to do the work as trust increases, and there's a clear criteria for decision making. But a number of intrinsic and extrinsic factors can hinder the progressive development of a commercial relationship and may actively damage it. And this is relevant to the negotiation because negotiations may be one way of the causes of relationship damage, and negotiations may be one way to repair that damage. So approaches to the management of conflict include working together to solve the problem, integrating overarching goals, providing more resources, avoiding or smoothing the conflict, compromising, altering the human variable by introducing or expelling personnel, or altering the structural variable by changing the environment. Now, relationships repair and dispute resolution may be conducted through issues management or negotiation, which offers the cheapest and quickest options, or through an alternative dispute resolution, making use of conciliation or mediation. And then finally, when trust is lost, the dynamics of a relationship can change completely. And sometimes this is a conscious shift, other times it lays at a subconscious level. But regardless of that, the damage may be irreversible. And trust is what makes us open. We open up completely to others. And it's what makes us more transparent. And therefore, a solid foundation of trust makes the best relationships. And there are ways to build trust, but it can take a long time. So you've got this thing about clearing the air, acknowledging the need for improvement, following up on promises, defining and redefining expectations, frequent contact, seconding staff to your supplier, closer monitoring, award of compensation and concessions, and engaging in supply development and support. And that's the end of Learning Outcome 1. Thank you for watching.